Hi there guys, welcome back, or welcome for the first time. So what I'm going to be doing today is covering a quick usage for the audio chip. It's arguably one of the easiest chips to use. It's very sort of plug and play. There's not too many methods to use with it. Obviously you can get rather complex with the audio chip, but this is a very basic understanding of how to set it up and how to play a sound. And what we're going to do is have a little bit of control and make it so when we press a button the sound will play. So what we want to do first is obviously set up our gadget. Okay, so there's a few components that we require for the audio chip to work. First off, we need a ROM chip. Now the ROM chip allows us to access any asset that we import via the import feature. So this will allow us to grab our sound off of our computer and actually be able to work with it and play with it. Okay, next up we need a CPU, obviously. And the purpose of the CPU allows us to write the code that's needed to actually interact with the gadget. And then lastly, we need an audio chip. So there's our audio chip. And as I said, we're going to put a button in just so we have a little bit of control over the gadget rather than having a sound constantly looping, because that gets rather irritating. There we go. So there's our button. Now you're probably thinking, but wait, I've seen a speaker in the output. Now it currently seems like those speakers don't really have any functionality. It seems like they are mostly just sort of decorative. I imagine there will be functionality in them sooner or later, maybe the next update, who knows. But yeah, as of current, a speaker isn't required to get audio to play. So we've got our gadget set up. Now what do? Well, we need to import our sound into the game so the game has access to it. So what we're going to do is go over to our folder structure. So we'll do that now. So here's my folder, which is so if you go onto this PC, then you want to go documents, then my games. I've just gone past there, my games, and then in my games you should see a retro folder. Double click on that, then there is an import folder. So I've already got my sound in here. You can name it anything you like. I believe it can be .wav or .mp3. I haven't had much of a play. MP3 definitely works. I know that 100%. I can't see why .wav wouldn't, because that's storing the raw waveform and it should be able to read that. But yeah, .mp3 works perfectly fine. So go to like a free sound website or something like that for your sound effects. So we've got the sound in our import folder. Now what? Well, we want to head back to the game. So we're back in the game and we want to go over to here, and if you're seeing it like this, go into edit, and then there's this button in the top right, and that allows us to import an asset. What we want to do is locate where our sound is. Luckily for us, the devs have put in a handy little icon which says, hey look, this is my sound. So we want to click on the sound and it'll go green once highlighted, confirm, and then here we can specify the name of it. I'm just going to call this ding because that's all I need. So you don't need any form of file extension or whatever. The game reads it and understands what format it is. Okay, so we'll call it ding. Happy days, there it is. And there's even a little preview down here so we can play the sound now and just sort of understand, well, what the sound is. There you go. It's a bit jarring, but there's a ding sound effect. nice and simple. Okay, so next up, we want to be able to reference the sound in our script, and this is where the ROM comes into play. So we need to get the ROM chip off the gadget itself, which we can do via gadget.rom. Then under ROM, you've got two options. You've got system and you've got user. Now, system currently is provided by the devs, and it only holds a basic standard font. So when we come to look at the video chip, and I do a little showcase tutorial on that, we will be using the system side of the ROM chip to grab that default font when chatting. But for now, we're working with user, which is where our sound is stored. So in the user, you can then reference it via audio samples, and then you can append a dot at the end and type ding, or because it returns, I believe it returns a table, so you could also reference it as a string. So if you know the name of it, you can reference it by a string. I personally prefer to reference it just appending it via a dot. Okay, that's just how I like to do it. It's, you know, arguably doing it via a string is, if you've got a lot of items in there, it might be a quicker method to search. I don't quite know the ins and outs of the Lua engine, but yeah. So we've got the sound sample. Okay, so next up we need to get our audio chip. So this references our audio chip. The colon here, you might be wondering, why is this colon here? This just allows us to make sure we definitely have an audio chip. So what we're saying is we want to create a variable called audio that has the type of audio chip. This means that we could now, I'll give you an example, we could put in here hello world, and you'll see it's red, right? And the error for this is string could not be converted to audio chip. So this just allows us to be a little bit safer with our code and make sure that we're getting the expected items that we want. So let's just undo that. There we go. So now we'll grab our button, and we can store that in a variable, or we can reference it straight away. So what we'll do is a little if statement, which allows us to, well, basically run a check to see if a particular value is met, then we will do everything stated. Otherwise we will, you know, sort of, well, just carry on with the rest of the programming loop. Okay, so if gadget.led button 0, so in theory we could leave it at that, because it's basically saying if it detects that there is a button 0. However, we want to check for the button down event. Okay, so this basically means every time we click the button down, it will trigger the if statement, right? And we will go from there. Okay, so if gadget led button 0 dot button down, then here is where we want our audio chip code. So I've got the community made docs open right now, which I will pull up. I forgot to do that in the Wi-Fi tutorial. So here is the community docs for the audio chip, and the particular function we're after is this play audio sample. Okay, so what we're going to do is use this, and it takes in two arguments. It takes an audio sample and it takes a channel number. Okay, this channel number, I believe it goes 1 through, there you go. For a small one it's 1 to 4, medium you have 16, a large one you have 32. We're going to use channel 1 because it's available, it's the first one, yeah, we could choose something silly like 4, and it would still work. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to reference our audio chip, and we're going to do dot, and then if we scroll down in the list you see play. So we'll go audio.play. Now if you look here, the internal docs is asking for the audio chip to be provided. Now we want to supply this audio chip, so we could do it by going audio.play audio, and that would supply the audio quite happily. It will complain saying, hang on a minute, I need 2 more arguments. Okay, but the way I like to use the audio chip is if you put a colon there, it will reference the audio chip itself. So it will insert itself at the start of the argument list. That way we don't need to reference it again within the arguments. It just makes things look so much neater. So now we need 2 arguments. The arguments we need, obviously the audio sample. So we'll provide sound, that's what we referenced up here earlier. And we'll give a channel number, which is just a number, an integer value. So number 1 is what we want. So that is everything, and we'll just end the function there. So now when we start the gadget, everything works fine, everything's happy days. When I click this button, we will get a ding. There you go, lovely, a nice little ding sound. Okay, and that is how to use the audio chip very quickly in its very base form. You can obviously attach a slider to it, something like that, which allows for you to control the audio. In fact, we'll do that now. We'll shift the button, if I can grab it. What are you doing? I can't move the button. Okay, well, it's probably because I have that open. Yes, it was. So we've got the button. We'll grab an input. You can use a slider for this. We'll go for a slider. There you go, it just about fits on. So we've got our slider now. So this is quite quick and quite easy to do. And what we're going to do is reference the slider. So local slider is of type slider. This again makes sure that we get a slider, and it's equal to gadget dot slider 0. And for this I'm going to actually call the value number. Okay, so dot value gives us its raw value. I will remove this type. So now whenever I reference slider, I know I'm getting the raw value. In fact, an even better name for this could be volume. Okay, so we'll call it volume. That way we know we're dealing with the volume slider. Okay, so what we want to do, you can place it in the update loop, and we will do another if statement. So we will say if volume, we will keep it as gadget.slider0, and you'll see why. So if we reference volume, you'll see that there is a is moving value. So if the volume is moving, then what we want to do is we want to set the channel volume to the value. Okay, so we'll go back to the docs and we'll have a quick look, and if you notice there is a set channel volume. Okay, and it takes 2 arguments. It takes the volume number, so 0 to 100, and it takes the channel number. So remember, we referenced it as channel 1 in our code. You can see it just here off to the left. Channel 1 is the channel we're using, so we will reference that channel when we call this function. Okay, so again with this function, if we look at audio, we will call dot. So it's, again, it wants us to reference the audio chip. So what we're going to do is use a colon and set channel volume. Now under channel volume, obviously it takes two arguments, takes the volume. So what we want to do is volume dot value. Okay, so this gives us the value of that, and we need one more argument, and that's the channel number, so channel 1. So when we move this, it will update the volume, and of course if we hit the button, it will play the sound. Now in theory, we should be able to fluctuate the volume whilst the sound is playing. Let's give that a quick go now. So you'll notice initially the volume itself didn't affect it. So the audio chip starts at a default volume. So we could add in a little bit of code that says, hang on a minute, before we carry on with this update loop, just set the volume to what our slider is set to. But as you can see, we have volume control as well as the ability to play the sound whenever we want. Obviously you can go into more depth and sort of have a play pause button as well, which we could look at doing down the road, but for now this is a very simple use case for the audio chip. Hope you enjoy, and if you've got any questions or queries, put them in the comments and I'll try and get back to you as quick as I can. I will link my code in the description, and I will also upload this gadget to the Steam Workshop just so you can have a look and see. Cheers.